Hello. At this stage of the web page project, we have some important material to cover in terms of design and thinking about how you need to go about adding certain kinds of elements to your page and thinking about layout and design and sort of the position of images in relation to text and that kind of good stuff. So we're going to cover some really important principles of design and thinking about how to apply those to your page. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And the first thing I'm going to do is go to D2L. And I've added a link that we'll go to in a moment. But first, I wanted to have us look at a section in the textbook that's actually really helpful. So if you go to textbook and click the link, which I've already done, there is a part of the textbook, several chapters focusing on media and design. So normally I would have assigned some of these and we would have, read some and I would have put together a quiz on them. But for the interest of time and to not, sort of require unnecessary extra work at this stage, I'll just point out some useful things to you now, and then you can go back and look at some of this more, on your own as you're working on your page, right? This is a good resource to be able to refer back to. So there's the introductory section, choosing media. So this is important to remember that this section, these several chapters on design, aren't just about sort of graphic design or web design, right? There are other things they're talking about here. So that's important to keep in mind. So they talk about, designing an academic essay and that kinds of things. Basic principles of design. So this is really useful. Be consistent, right? And this talks about, in presentations and prints. For web pages, be consistent is a lot about, using a simple color scheme that's consistent throughout, for instance. And it's also about using the same formatting for certain levels of headings is where this is relevant to you. So like even looking at our textbook, right? So a chapter heading looks like this. And then within the chapter, there are subsections, like this, considering the rhetorical situation. Notice how this is left aligned. It's bold, it's blue, and there's nothing, like there's space above and below it, right? Same thing with this, left aligned, bold, blue, space above and below. Here, we've got bold and blue, but there isn't space above and below. So what this tells us, even though it's the same color and it's bold, it's also a little bit smaller of a font. I can tell just by looking at it. This is a lower level type of subheading, right? So if you think about, and we'll look at this in WordPress in a moment, but if you think about the difference between like an H2 kind of heading and an H3 heading, or an H3 and an H4, that's exactly what's going on here. And let me go ahead, let me pull up WordPress too, so we can actually see how that works. So I've got my site menu up. I'm going to go to pages. And I want to make sure I click on my page, which is one of the reasons why it's really helpful to name your page with your name. It saves a lot of confusion I've had in previous years when students would name a page writing as a business major, and then several business majors would try to do the same, would accidentally mess up each other's pages. It's a little simpler this way. So I am in edit mode on my page, right? And I've got my sections, writing in the career field, writing in the major. So let's say I was going to have, at least a paragraph on writing in the major under this heading. And let's see so this is an H2 heading right now. And then let's say I was going to have a subsection within writing in the major that was going to be, I'm going to do heading again. And here I'm going to make it an H3 heading. So right away, you can see it just made the font smaller. And let's say for this one, I'm going to do writing assignments. Yes. Let's do something like this. Level course. Okay, so this is an H3 heading, whereas this is an H2 heading, right? And so they look a little bit different even in edit mode. Now, edit mode looks the same no matter what theme we are using for the website. And the theme is something that I've set up because it governs the entire site, not just one particular page on it. So the theme is WordPress, it combines a few different functions within WordPress that includes a style sheet, which determines, sort of font styles and colors within a website. Now, within that site, there are still often choices that you can make for individual elements on a page or, on different pages, right? So there are things that you can do to customize your page. But one thing to be aware of is seeing your page live is going to look in some ways different from edit mode, because edit mode it's just got the content that I've put in, but it hasn't put it in the website's formatting yet. Right? Because we're still in this like adding content, creating content kind of mode. And then when we go to preview or update, that's when we're actually going to see our website styles applied. So right now, our H2 and our H3, they look gray. And I don't know what this font is. It is the same kind of font used for both sizes, for both levels. But yeah, so this is what they look like in edit mode, right? Now let's click update. And for a few seconds, this view page pops up after you update. Now here it looks pretty much the same actually. But if we had our style set up differently for the entire site, this might not look the same on the page as it does in edit mode. And also, I have hardly any text on here yet, but as most of you should have some text on your page by now, hopefully at least a few paragraphs. The width of this column on the web page itself is different from the width of where you can edit in edit mode, right? And so as you put text in, it's going to look a little bit different on the live site than what it does in edit mode, right? So those are some things you want to be aware of and think about. I want to get into color and headings, but let's go back to those basic principles first. All right, so be consistent, keep it simple, right? You want readers to be able to see quickly, intuitively. People know what a link looks like usually, right? When you go to a website, most of the time, if it's a decently well-developed site, you're going to know, what the links are and where to find them and how they will work, for instance. where the menus are and that sort of thing, right? So part of this, what I think is useful for us to think about is usability and accessibility, right? And they mention here using white space. We're going to talk more about that. Resisting the temptation to fill pages with fancy graphics or unnecessary animations. These are all ways of making your text simple to read. So resisting those things. And in that case, it's not just about simplicity, it's that you can use different kinds of technology. Like I think JavaScript is no longer, that's one that's now defunct, but that used to be a good, fairly easy way to add movement to a site. And there are still lots of ways to do that. I know some faculty, even at Central State, who do an assignment a little bit different than this, but may still have a student create a website or a web page. They'll have them use a service called Wix instead of WordPress. And Wix can work decently well. The reason I don't use it is because it's the kind of platform that will often allow you to make really cool looking things, right? Like there are templates and stuff that it's really easy to add movement and these sort of graphic elements to your site. And that looks really cool. The problem is not only do those, additional complicating things potentially affect readability, they actually affect accessibility. Because when you have elements like that, when you have movement or animation on a website, that is going to make it more difficult for screen readers to clearly be able to translate that website for people who are visually impaired. So in terms of accessibility, universal web design, trying to make it so that anybody anywhere can pretty much access your content, keep it simple is really important to that. So it's not just sort of good design is simple design, but it's also that it's more accessible. So being more easily readable also makes it so that you won't sort of run into those problems where you're making it more difficult for some people to access your site than others. All right, aim for balance. They give you an example down here and talk about that. Color and contrast carefully. So black text on a white background with perhaps one other color for headings, or you could have a couple. I have had students in the past go a little overboard. I've had students go a lot overboard with color on their web pages before. I've had students where they've had several paragraphs, and every paragraph, the text was a different color, bright yellow and bright blue and bright red and bright purple, one paragraph after another. Made it very hard to read because not all of those colors, like the bright yellow, does not contrast well on a white background. So it's very difficult to read. So you want contrast, and also you want that consistency, remember? And so you want things to sort of make sense. If you use a different color for every single one of your headings and subheadings, then the sort of hierarchy of, this is a section and then this is a subsection within that is much harder to make sense of if everything is a different color, if there's no consistency or pattern to it. Use available templates. This is actually made really easy for us by WordPress because the theme that our site uses has already kind of set parameters for templates. When you go to create a new page, it does give you some template options there, but I really want you to use a blank page to start with so that you can create it and apply these things that we've been working on and learning and that we're talking about in this video as well to really understand how it is that you're making a decent web page, right? And what that entails, what you have to do in order to achieve that. Elements of design. So that was some basic principles. And so those are really useful. Elements of design, font, it talks about, and it gives you some examples here. We're writing an informative page. The whole site's an informative resource. You are writing an informative page for other college students to be able to see the kinds of writing that they would have to do for a particular major and career, right? So you want it to be kind of formal. You don't want to have really, like some of these sorts of typefaces that they show here, these fonts. You want it to be formal, not too sort of informal. And that's important. Layout, so the relationship of images to text, right? And this is what we're going to talk more about right now. So paragraphs, you know what paragraphs are, but then we've got lists, right? Which you can do as a numbered list or a bullet pointed list. Numbered lists would be, I think they mentioned this here, if you were putting things, if the order mattered, you would want to use a numbered list. If not, you could just use bullet points. And most of the time, for the kinds of pages we're creating, bullet points are better. If you can come up with a way to use a bullet pointed list on your page, you should. Why do I say that? Because a lot of the content you're adding a few images and then text, right? These paragraphs that you have to write about writing in your field. But you don't want it to look like an academic essay about writing in your field. You want it to look like a web page, and the images help with that. A little bit of color in the headings is going to help with that. But also you want to be able to break up your page so that it's not just paragraph after paragraph like this, but that if you've got a bullet pointed list in there, it changes the layout to, that part of your page, and it can make it seem more accessible, like it's less intimidating than seeing, a page full of text when somebody who's on a website is usually not, expecting to see just a page full of text. They're expecting to see images and links and other things going on to help engage them. And so a bullet pointed list can and will help with that. And so if you can do it, you should. And if you think about those interview questions that you asked, some of them asked about things like what kinds of writing assignments an upper level, undergraduate would have to do for one of the courses, right? So let me get back into my edit mode here. So I've got writing for upper level coursework as this subsection. So I'm going to need to add at least a paragraph here. I'm going to need to add some text, but then I could also have a bullet pointed list in there. So I'm going to do a paragraph block. And then maybe you already spotted it. There's a block for list. So I can choose bullet points or numbered. Like I said, most of the time, the kinds of list you would use, you just want a bullet pointed list. All right, so types of writing for an upper level undergraduate English major, right? So there might be research papers, conference, presentations. Remember, I want to be consistent. So if I'm not capitalizing everything here, I don't want to do it here. Presentations. Literary analyses, since I'm using plural elsewhere. See if I can get one or two more. arguments. Yeah, let's go with arguments. And then let's say group work or something like that. Group. Okay, so maybe you got responses in your interview that included a few things, a list of items like this. If you did, even if they were included in, somebody, your interviewee who was just talking to you, you could incorporate those into a list. Now, remember, you don't just want to copy and paste the entire answer you got to question 4 from your interview into your page, but you could do something like having a paragraph of you talking about, writing for upper level coursework. And then at the end of that paragraph, setting up this list, you could say something like, according to Professor, that's it, assuming you would have mentioned your interviewee already. If not, you want to use the full name, right? But assuming you did, Professor Holmes, writing assignments, upper level courses, and then you got your bullet pointed list, right? And that way you've cited it. You've mentioned in your sentence that it came from your interview. You still are going to need to have your works cited section at the bottom of your page where you'll say personal interview and do an MLA style citation for your interview. But you don't need anything in parentheses here because you've already done it in the sentence, right? So that's one good way to incorporate information from your interview. It's also a good way in thinking about layout to sort of break up what could otherwise be a few paragraphs in a row. That might just be a page of text, right? Okay, let me jump back in here. So headings are necessary elements. I'm requiring you to have at least a couple of headings that you're going to use on your page. And so we've talked about how to do that. And here, this shows you some examples of the differing levels, right? Making those visible. Yeah. So notice the different formatting for each of those. Position them appropriately. Usually that's going to be done. Remember, this isn't just for websites. This is for essays and everything else. But WordPress is already going to determine where a certain level heading, goes on your page. So you really don't have to worry about that. White space is something that they mention very briefly here, and they don't really explain it. Use white space to separate the various parts of a text. In general, use 1-inch margins, blah, blah, blah. White space is actually a really important and helpful element of design and specifically in thinking about layout. So here, that's the end of this particular chapter within the section on design. I've gone ahead and found an additional web page that seems useful that I've also included a link to in our D2L. So I'm going to go back to module 3. And so here I've got this link that says Principles of Design. And so this page, it's going to cover some of the same stuff that the textbook did. And the textbook helps elaborate on some things in useful ways. I think it's worth looking through that chapter in more detail on your own that we were just looking at together. But this is also really helpful in, further elaborating some of those concepts. I didn't watch the video. I'm not really worried about that, but you're welcome to check that out if it's useful. So they talk about balance, right? and they give you some visual examples of that, which is really useful. Different kinds of balance, right? Even if you have things that aren't symmetrical, they can still be balanced. Contrasts, which we talked about in terms of the color of your text and it contrasting with the background. Emphasis, and this is where having ways of sort of highlighting text or using color can be really useful. And also the assignment requires you to do that for your key terms, right? And so that's something you need to sort of emphasize somehow, your key terms. Proportions, so you don't have the elements that are really disproportionate to each other. Repetition and pattern, there's that consistency. Movement. Now, movement here, they're not talking about animation. They're not talking about that kind of movement. They're talking about the movement of the reader's eye, right? So that the placement of these elements, size, boldness, color, other features, goes with the way that we are, taught and trained to read things and to look at images and stuff, right? Which for most, at least sort of Western cultures, is left to right, top to bottom. And so where the text appears on this page is very purposeful, the size, the color, the images, to work with that. So that's what they're talking about with movement. And then white space. They talk about, you may be tempted to like try to cram a lot of stuff in. You shouldn't. You don't want to space it out too much either, right? You don't want someone to think that they're at the end of their page and they're not, that they just need to scroll down further. But you do want things spaced out some. Negative space is another good way of thinking about this. So we'll talk more about that. Variety, unity, they give you some nice visual examples of things. Okay, so this is an additional resource. The link is in D2L. Now, let me get back to my edit mode. So my white space is describing everything around and in between everything else. It's where things are not, right? So it's all of the space between and around images, texts, anything that appears on your page is white space. So this is really important and useful to think about in terms of coming up with a good, accessible, attractive design that isn't, overwhelming in some way. But like I said, you also don't want things too spaced out. You want to find a nice sort of middle ground there. So right now, I don't have much text in my page, my example page here. I've got some images. I've got some headings. I haven't done much text yet. So for the sake of keeping this video not run much longer, to keep it fairly short, I'm just going to find some text that I can add without trying to write it right now. So here's some actual little bio stuff that I have on my real personal website. So I'm going to take this and then paste it as a paragraph in my edit mode. Right, so that's probably what I would put here. Now it included my links as links, which is really convenient for me, but it doesn't help me show you how to do links. So we're going to make sure we cover that too. So we've got a little bit of text in there now. Let me get some more text to work with. Let me see if I can find a section. I mean, at this point, I'm going to put things like not in a very sensible. I mean, it's fine. Let me go with this because this is just a straight paragraph. So don't worry about the content of this. This isn't the same. This isn't actually a paragraph about writing in the major, but we can get it something in there for thinking about our layout. Is an example of that. You would normally want a paragraph there. This is a bit of a longish paragraph. Edit mode. So again, we're pretending like this is a paragraph that's actually talking about upper level undergraduate coursework, right? Put that separately here. All right, and we've got that. And then let's get a paragraph for writing in the career field. I'm just going to take the rest of this paragraph. If you ever see a website and you see, I think it's lorem ipsum is the phrase that gets repeated over and over. It's a Latin phrase that's purposefully meaningless. And it gets repeated over and over because that's what web designers use as placeholders for text. So, you know, they'll put that in. I'm using text from a different web page at the moment, but they would use lorem ipsum over and over and over again, with the idea that somebody needs to go in and replace that with the actual relevant text. All right, writing in the career field. I want to put a block. There we go. And I could always just go, if I'm having trouble getting that blue plus button to show up there, I can go over here, add it this way. Did it add it? Or is it letting me position it? Oh, interesting. I'll paste it in here. You can also, so here's the reason I wanted to do all this quickly, is to cover some things quickly with you about playing with and manipulating your layout in edit mode, which is where you need to do all this stuff, right? So you could decide, like this image, that you want to move it down. So or you want to move one of your paragraphs or something, right? So you can click into any block and then go to these move up and down arrows. After you've clicked the block, you've got to click it first before you get that option. But then you can move that up and down your page. So let's say I want to move it there instead, right? And I've done that. So similarly, I can move these images around. Now that's only going to move up and down. And this is where you say, Dr. Holmes, great, but I'm really interested in doing that like asymmetrical design you were showing, where I would have an image up here and some text and then an image in the right. And how could I do something like that? In terms of left and right, there's a different way you need to go about manipulating your layout. So these images are all right now left aligned, right? They all appear aligned with the left margin here. So if I click on any image, if I hover over this, it says change alignment. So here's where things can get tricky / interesting. And actually, I'm going to click off this. I want to use an image that's by text. I want to go back up to this one. So right now, this image is left aligned and there's no text around it. But maybe you want to have text over here. You're still going to be thoughtful about white space and not overclutter things, but you don't just want to have a bunch of images by themselves. You want to have some text beside some of those images. That's actually really easy to do. Well, maybe it's really easy. Maybe it's sometimes it's not as easy as it should be. If you still want it left aligned, because this is automatically left aligned, but if I click change alignment and it's none is what this does. If I change it to left align, it's going to put text wrapping around on the right. So that's going to look, well, it's not showing you how it's going to look. It did seem like it made the image bigger, which was a little strange. Oh, you know what? Maybe it's the image actually has white space in it or something. Because sometimes the image is more than just like the image file is more than just the silhouettes here. All right, let me go back into edit mode. Since that did not do what I wanted it to. At this point, it's probably useful for me to mention if I've gone through anything too fast, or if you're realizing now you need to go back and rewatch something about your different subheading levels or something like that. Like that's the beauty of a video. You can pause it or rewind it or whatever. You can keep clicking pause and then trying to do these things on your page and then click play if you want to, right? So let me click back into this image. See, it's not showing anything over here. So maybe, so I've got that left aligned. Maybe it's now gonna want me to make this right aligned before it'll put it beside it. It's not looking like it though. So let me go back to left aligned. You should not center text unless you've got a good reason to do it. Like if you wanted to center your headings or something, a certain level of heading, you could. But generally, when students go through and center a paragraph, it just makes it look weird and it's harder to read. So generally, you're going to keep your text left aligned. I want to try to maybe shrink this down. Maybe that's the problem, is it's making this image too big to really put text beside it. That doesn't seem to be the issue, though. I could crop it, but there's not really anything I need to crop there. So let me go back to this. I just undid the left align. Let's do, so what align center is going to do, it's going to center the image. You could center an image. I'm just saying you would never want to center a paragraph, right? You could center an image and that would be fine. If you center an image, it's going to leave white space on both sides. It's only when you put it left align or right align that it's going to wrap the text around it, except it's not, which is really strange. I don't want to add text over image. No, I don't want to do that. That just got really weird. Let's go undo. I wonder if it's something about the positioning of this. Let me try moving it up. Ah, there we go. So I just had to move the image up so that it's actually on the same level as this text, right? And if I move it up some more, it's going to put it in a different spot. So that's what the issue was. So this is how I could have the text wrapping around this way. If I want it the other way, I just go to left align. So I've got text wrapping around it. So that's different than if I do none, which, like I said, it doesn't wrap the text if you do none. So that's how you can manipulate where your image is in relation to your text. Now, maybe you would like there to be more space around your image, or maybe you would like to make some fine-tune adjustments to this. You can try, you can certainly play around with the size of the image and things, but just keep in mind that your edit mode isn't going to look like your actual screen, right? And that this isn't going to make it super easy for you to put an image anywhere you would want to. You've got to be able to think in these terms of like image in relation to other elements and stuff, right? And so you may have to play around with things a little bit. Don't be afraid to. I want you to play around with things, but just remember you've got a back button and undo, and also save frequently, right? Click update and save, because it's really easy to pull up previous saves, even if it's 7 updates ago. It's really easy to do that. So let me show you what I mean about the text. I think this should be able to give us a good example. So notice we've got the image, text to the right of it, and then about 4 lines of text below it. Let's go ahead and do update, view page. Oh, that looks way different, right? Now we've got a bunch of lines below it. So this is what I was saying with your text in edit mode is going to look different from your text on your page. Your page is going to look different than what it looks like in edit mode. So you need to keep that in mind and save frequently, preview frequently, to see what it's actually going to look like, right? Okay, I think we're almost done with everything I wanted to cover in this video. Let me go back into edit mode for a moment. So if you wanted to do that asymmetrical balance, you would want to do a right-aligned image, probably at some point. So we could center this. I probably want to make this smaller too. And again, you're going to want to pretend that all of these images are relevant to my page that's talking about writing as an English major, even though there are images about other things that I use just to give you examples of stuff. So this one I'm going to center, so there'll be no text wrapped around it. This one I'm going to right align. And maybe I'll have text wrap around this. Let's see what that's going to look like. Okay, yeah, that might not be bad. All right, so let's update and let's see how our design is turning out for real. Notice I think our font is actually bigger on our page than it is in edit mode too. I think that was one of the things I did to make things more easily legible. Okay, so we've got the image there. We've got the centered image. We've got this right aligned. We probably want to play around with making this image a little bit smaller since this column is kind of skinny here. Makes it a little bit difficult to read. But overall, we've got some of that balance and things, right? That we were looking for that you need to be thinking about. Right, 2 things left I want to do: color and links. So get back into edit mode. Okay, so I already know this is big. I'm going to go ahead and make it smaller. Okay, so you need to add color. I'm specifically telling you, don't go crazy, right? Add color, think about color, but also think about contrast, and you want it to be formal, kind of professional looking, right? And so you don't want to have neon pink on a yellow background. So what you could do, there are a few things we could do. Remember your key terms. I didn't pull up the assignment prompt to show this to you again, but it's in the assignment prompt. Your key terms need to be highlighted in some way. So you could actually sort of highlight them, or you could make them a particular color or any number of other things. You could have a section on key terms, or you could just have them incorporated into a paragraph, but then you still want them clearly defined somewhere. So let me go ahead. I'm going to do a heading block. I want this to be an H2 level, which it is. I'm just going to call it key terms. Here I'm going to add some terms, chiasmus, alliteration, intertextual. I'm not going to bother actually defining these right now, but you will need to define yours, obviously, as I just said. Did I actually misspell that, or does it just not know how to spell it? It does not know how to spell it. Okay, because that's the right spelling for chiasmus. So let's pretend these are my actual key terms, and after each one, I have a definition for it, right? We need to highlight these somehow. So what I could do is pull my cursor over them, and then let me click this options. It's not quite giving me what I want. So there is highlight, and what that's going to do is actually make it look like a highlighter. You could do that. You could do an underline. I don't really like any of those. I want to give it color is what I want to do. So I'm going to go over to this little settings gear. This is what I wanted to come up. So notice I've got color. I'm in paragraph, right? I've got my word highlighted here. So now I'm going to give it color. It's going to be on a white background, so I want a dark color. So, and I probably don't want to mess with the background color unless I want to do like white on a black background or something. And you could do a little bit of that. Again, you just don't want to go overboard with anything, right? So let's go with this. Yeah, let's go with this vivid purple. And see. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Now, that's pretty dark, but still not great as far as being able to see it very well. We could play around with the size of the font here. I actually am going to make it bold as well as give it a color. Yeah, that helps. Okay, so now let's say I want to do that to all my key terms. I want to be consistent, right? So if you're going to make something a color, make everything that's like that the same color, whether that's a heading or a subheading or key terms or whatever. So I'm going to make it all the same vivid purple and bold. All right, so that's how you can add some color to your page. You could also decide that all of your H3 headings, for example, are going to be a different color, not different from each other, but a different color from your H2 headings or something. So this is an H3. Go ahead and highlight this. And I'm in heading. I still have the same kind of options here, right? So my theme colors are right here. So maybe I want to go with the sort of dark green for my H3 headings. And if I do that, I want to make sure I do it for every H3 level heading. Right, so that's an H2. That's an H2. Is that the only H3 I have? It is the only H3 I have so far. You know, so if I have a separate section within writing in the major that's talking about writing expectations, you know, then I could do that as another H3 heading. And if I do, though, I want to make sure I make it the same color. I could also decide I make my H2 level headings. I could make them the same shade of green. They'll still look different because they're a different size from my H3 headings. Or I could go with something else. I think they're probably this medium gray. Let's check. Let's see if it changes when I click dark gray. Oh, maybe not. Let me try the medium. Okay, they're dark gray. So we could go with medium gray instead. If we do, we want to do it to all of them, right? So this is how you can add color. You just want to make sure you contrast, keep it simple, and be consistent. Medium gray. And this is already, that's the medium gray. That's medium gray. And I'll make this medium gray. And then I'll go ahead and do update. Like I said, update frequently because that's how you save your work. Preview or just view page. I don't need to preview since I've updated. All right, so that's the medium gray. Notice my heading, my H1 is darker. And then the green for my H3 level headings and the purple there. Good. One last thing, links, and then I will we'll wrap it up there. So let's say I'm a communications is hard because if you just try to look up writing and communications, writing is a form of communication. So it's really, really tough to have that do anything. Let's try writing pre-law. Should do it as hyphenated. Let's just do it like that and see what we get. Okay, it spaced them is what it did. Legal writing pre-law program. So here I'm giving you an example of how you can find an additional resource beyond your interview that might help you get some more content. Just remember, you need to cite your sources and it's still your page. So you could find additional sources, but you would want to be finding ways to incorporate them into your paragraph about writing in your major, in your field, in your, whatever paragraph you're working on at the time. Let's try this. Actually, this is just a blog. I mean, this might be useful, but it's just a blog post. This one is from University of Massachusetts, so this might be really useful. So let's say you used something from this in your page, right? You quoted one or two sentences from it, something like that. You cited it. And in that case, you would either mention about, in this University of Massachusetts site about pre-law or whatever, you'd need to cite it at the bottom as well. But you could also link back here, right? So, I mean, it's a really short, simple page, but it could be really, it could be useful. So I'm going to go ahead and get this URL. I'm going to copy it, go back into edit mode, and then let's pretend I already have something quoted from it in this paragraph. Actually, let's not do that one since I already have this bullet pointed list here. So let's pretend it's something in this paragraph. We could say, oh, I'm not in an edit mode. Let me get into edit mode. You could also go to the My Site and get into edit mode that way if you can't find the little edit mode thing in the bottom right like I am. but then you have to click back into your page, of course. All right, so pretend we've got something in this paragraph quoted from that website. We've got it cited in the paragraph. We've got it cited at the bottom of our page. We could also say, for more information or this is where if a website gives you a list of things, you could quote a few of them and you could say, see the rest of the list here, something like that, right? Mass, I think it was Amherst, their Amherst campus, Massachusetts. I'm not going to remember how to spell that. It's almost certainly wrong, but hopefully it'll fix it. All right, so I need to add a link. I could do something like, this is what I am going to do. I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to use the URL. You could also, right, you could have text right up here, right? I've made Central State University link to Central State's homepage. So you could do that with any text anywhere in your page. You could highlight something, click the little chain, which is the link icon. I would paste it. And we already did this actually for citing your images. So if you go back to that video on images, the last video on images, it talks about how to make your image a link. I want to make sure I apply. And then I also like having it open in a new tab, but that's entirely optional. So I've made that a link. I actually don't want to do that, but that was an example of how to do that. It's really easy. In this case, let me undo. Did that undo it? Maybe. Yes. In this case, what I want to do is actually include the URL and make the URL link to the site. So I could just highlight Amherst website and make that the link. But instead, I'm going to go ahead and include it here. Apply button. And there it's just gone ahead and did it for me. If I had highlighted text, it would have made whatever I had highlighted the link. But since I didn't highlight anything, I just had my cursor there, it put the link in for me. So that's how you can add links. And of course, those will have the color and formatting that goes along with our theme that I've already set in place. So the links for this particular theme for our site use that dark green color to set them off from the regular text. All right. So I think that covers an awful lot with design, layout, color, sort of most of what you need to know about design beyond what we've talked about with images in previous classes and previous videos. Let me know what questions you have. Let me know if there's other things that you want to do with your page that I haven't covered. Could be that I forgot something. It could be that there's something I don't normally include that I'm happy to add. Sometimes I'll have students who will want to add a YouTube video or some similar clip on their web page. I'm happy to cover that. I'll probably mention it in class, during the last regular week of classes, but it's not required, right? That would be purely optional. But if you wanted to do it, we could certainly do that. So I can always cover other stuff that I haven't covered yet. We'll still be working on things together, throughout the remainder of the semester. So it's not like this is the end of what you need to know to do on your page, but this covers an awful lot. So please let me know what questions you have, or if you want me to go through anything with you in class or over Zoom. I am, as always, happy to do that. And I will see you next time.